Okay. Okay. We're going to get on my demonstration to this point here on my blouse where I've got my neck facings put in and my zipper installed. So let me actually, and people are welcome to examine that. Let me get these. So we may or may not have gotten around to doing these samples last spring, but these are building to that. So here, this sample had curved neck facings and understitching, yay. And so curved neck facings on the blouse, understitching. And then this one added in what we need to do to get a clean finish at the top for a zipper when we have facings. So there's some folding around. And part of the deal is you put the facing on and do the folding before you put the zipper in. So I'll do that part, and then later on I'll do the zipper today for you guys so that I'm not totally overwhelming you. So here's these two things as well, if anybody wants to. And there's some, I think, on the other side. All right, I'm set up. Let me get this. What have we got here? Okay. Step one, cut out everything. Fuse interfacing to facings. So these are the only three pieces that need interfacing. And I told you guys I didn't give you interfacing patterns, just kind of cut from these guys. So your interfacing will probably be, completely the same size as mine, or as your facing. But you can see mine was just a little bit smaller. And generally, like if I had given you interfacing pieces, you'd look similar to this, with the fusible being just a little bit smaller than the piece that's fusing onto. And that's so we can just have a little margin of error, especially in production when we're doing it really fast, so that if something's just slightly off place, maybe we still don't get any glue on the machinery. So in case down the road you encounter an interfacing pattern that's slightly smaller, that would be why. All right, then we stay stitch our necklines and armholes of our blouse. Okay. Stay stitching, just a normal stitch length. You don't need to back stitch even. Within the seam allowance, so on your armholes, you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you can be like maybe 3/8 from the edge. It's best to not be like right at the edge, if you can be further inside. And then your necklines, we only have a 1/4 inch seam allowance there, so you are going to be kind of close to the edge to stay inside there. What that little bit of stitching does is hopefully prevent any stretching out as we're handling and working with the garment. Because especially on our necklines, if it stretches out too much, then our facings may not fit correctly. They do not need to be stay stitched. Or if you had a collar going onto a neckline, you know, all of a sudden, you want to make sure that it fits properly. So there's other places, other times where stay stitching is a really good idea. I'll see students doing like a strapless something with a very angly here, that's very biasy, and I'll be like, you gotta stay stitch that. Otherwise, it's gonna get too big, like almost immediately. Okay, so I've stay stitched. I've got to join my shoulders. We're joining shoulders of facings to each other and shoulders of the blouse to each other, and then we circle the neck. Why do we do it like that? Well, the other way is really messy. If we were to, like, put the front facing onto the front and the back facings onto the back, and then jam everything together into that shoulder seam, it would be bulky and unsightly here. So I don't know if you've heard me talk about the order of operations and how we put things together. I know it's coming in one of your modules online. But you want to think about the more visually important seam coming last in the sequence. And so, you know, on this, like, the neckline edge, I would hope you would agree with me, is more visually important than the shoulders. You know, I mean, whoever sees your shoulders. So that comes after these guys. So that's a good rule of thumb, especially once you're like trying to figure out how to put together your own creations that don't come with any directions. On these guys, on the back, these back facings, this funny notched edge is your shoulder. I know you could, every now and then somebody wants to kind of put center back to front shoulder, but no. And then, I'm not done talking. You'll encounter some seams that maybe the length of the cut edge of the two pieces that you're joining together is different, as is the case here. The cut edge of the back facing is actually longer than the cut edge of the front facing, but that's not where we match them up. You know, we're sewing at 1/2 inch for our shoulder seam. So that's what we care about matching in length. And hopefully that does for you. So that's where I put them together is, you know, so those 1/2 inches are lining up, and I'm a little sticky out here and a little sticky out here, and that's okay. And 1/2 inch. All right, there's one. Now. There's two. I skipped step 3 in my talk just now, but darts. You're going to have to stitch your shoulder darts at least before you join your shoulders. Yeah. I have left my waist darts to be done in front of you guys as a reminder of how we do darts. So I'll get to those in a second. So I'll put together my blouse shoulders. Again, we've got this kind of notched shape here. You'll see why once you join them and press them open. You press the dart on the shoulder so the intake is going towards center. So vertical darts press the intake towards the center. So here's your vertical shoulder dart. Here's my center. The intake is pressed that way. That's kind of a visual thing too. As a rule, all your vertical darts go to the center and all your horizontal darts go down. Kind of like the shadow that's created, I know it's slight, but is, you know, that way. Like as we look at the figure, we want to work from the center around. Okay, so there's, did I do right sides together? That's one of the problems with muslin. We might just let that be for the sake of our demonstration. I'm going to be a little off. So yeah, pay attention with your muslin. The other thing when you're doing your back darts, pay attention that you make mirror images. It's real easy to make like two right backs accidentally because we don't have a wrong side of the fabric to remind us. So there we are. And so hopefully when you do like your facings, they make this nice little round neckline shape. And then you press them that way. I didn't press it on my other one and sort of regretted it, so we'll do it today. So the reason you've got that funny shape on your back shoulder is so that it kind of comes in line with the neckline once it's pressed open. Your front kind of sticks out. We can turn that away. But if you didn't have that funny shape, then it would probably do something more like that, and then the seam allowance might not get caught in our neck seam, and that could just cause some irritation. So that's why we true it out. It's called truing out your seam allowances. We'll go on and press these guys open as well. All right. So, before I go further, I'll do my waist darts. I guess I'll just fix my side bust darts later. So I'll do my waist darts the proper direction. So we remember darts. This is the right side. So. Single darts, you've got the two notches. You bring your notches together at the cut edge of the fabric. And then you've got your punch hole, which ends up on the fold right there. And we stitch from the notches a 1/2 inch past that punch hole. And if we need a little sort of straight guide for us, you can do my thread trick by putting a pin right at your vanishing point, the spot where you end your stitches, and take a thread, kind of wrap it around there to make a straight line for you. What do you do when you get to the end, the vanishing point of the dart?
You don't backstitch.
Yes, all of the above. Tie it is an option. You don't backstitch over top of your stitches. So yeah, you can just tie it. You can sort of jump back into the dart intake and do a little backstitch on the fold, or you can reduce your stitches in length and stitch off. So whichever you like to do. I usually just end up tying, to be honest, because when I do the reduce thing, I always have to remind myself to come back and go back to regular stitch length. All right, one more. There we are. There's my punch hole. So on your rubric, if you're looking sort of at that as you're working along, you'll see that like for the back shoulder darts, it says they should be 3 inches in length. Once it's sewn, you know, like remember that it'll be evaluated once it's all put together. So before you put it together, you should be at about 3.5 inches, because I'm not including that seam allowance in that 3 inches. So don't worry about that. Okay, yay, there we are. I will press them to the center. And now let's join the facings. Right sides together, neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder. You should have like a center front notch right there, the neckline. Match that guy. Okay, if it wasn't for this zipper business, we could just stitch now. But we want to have this all clean. So you see like there's a little bit of fabric that's kind of finished on itself there. Things tucked around, yes. So, you gotta remind yourself, like, how do the lap zippers work? We've got the stitching just showing on this side, which will be like the wearer's left. So the underlap part is on the right. So if I look at my back here, this is my wearer's right. That's the underlap side. So I'm going to do some folds. I fold my facing on that notch back on itself, like wrong sides together. So there's my center notch, and I've just folded the facing like that. Then my blouse, (5/8 of an inch fold. So there's like an 1/8 of an inch gap between my two folds. It's not much, but just a tiny little gap between the two folds. And That's how we'll stitch that. So then it'll come out looking with just that little tiny bit of gap between the two. It's asymmetrical because the other side's different. If you were doing a centered zipper, you could think it through and you'd only really have to think it through once because it would be symmetrical, but you know I like lap zippers. Okay, so what's that side? Well, this is right on center back. So we're gonna fold the blouse this time on that notch. And I usually go on and pin it like almost midway into my seam allowance, into that center back seam allowance. And then we want the gap between the two folds to be about 3/8 of an inch for these guys. So you're folding back a lot of this facing. So he's gonna go about to there. Look to make sure that you've got like all your folds still kind of straight. And if this is bothering you that there's so much, you could cut a 1/2 of an inch or so off. But okay. Now we're ready to stitch this baby 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. It's a concave curve. So we'll even do a little clipping once we're done. It helps if your needle stays threaded. All right, here we go. Keeping those cut edges together around my curve. Making sure that our shoulders going across them. And we're sewing across all these folds I just made. If, when it's all said and done, you can see a little bit of the stay stitching, pause and evaluate, why are we seeing the stay stitching? Were we generous at the stay stitch level and just got a little bit outside, or did you not take enough seam allowance on that piece? If it's the first, you were just a little generous, that's okay. Go on and remove the visible stay stitching. Otherwise, you can leave it in there. Okay, I'm almost done with this. I'm gonna trim my threads here. And since it's a concave curve, it gets flips, right? Just a single flip. Now in the factories, they would not bother to flip, but we have a moment to spare to flip, and it'll help it make a nicer curve. You're going to press this seam towards the facing. So guys here were pressed. Got that one there towards the facing. And then we stitch the seam allowance to the facing, and that is our understitching. I love understitching. Hopefully you start to associate facings with understitching and interfacing. Facings usually get interfaced and they usually get understitched. What does it do? Stitching helps hold this seam sort of to the inside just a little bit so that it doesn't roll out and show. And actually, in the factories, they would not be standing here pressing this. They would just jump straight to the understitching. So they kind of do it sometimes like in lieu of pressing. But you know, like if for whatever reason my facings were a contrasting fabric that I just wanted in there for fun but not to show while the person's wearing it, you know, the understitching would definitely help hold it all to the inside, keep it from rolling out. So that goes about 1/8 of an inch away from your neck seam in this case, which is pretty much just down the middle of your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So whether you do it from this side where you see the seam allowance or from this side doesn't matter to me, and I shouldn't be able to tell. I usually do it from the seam allowance side. And the last thing to say about it, you'll see on my samples here that like it didn't go all the way into the corner. Same thing on that one. You really can't, you know, you can't get all the way in there. So, you know, don't do, like, do no harm, just do good with the understitching. So there's a lot of times where it's not going to be the full length of the seam, and that's great. A little bit's better than none. Regular stitch length, and I am trying to keep everything like nice and smooth and flat because it does have the tendency to want to kind of bubble up under there, and then that would like defeat the purpose of the understitch. And yeah, I'm going across my clips. Something's happened to them. Okay, boom, you're done. Understood. Yeah. My needle thread broke. I backstitched here. Should have backstitched there. I'll fix that mess. So there you go. And I looked to make sure that I didn't like catch any funny pleats. I didn't. So I celebrate. And then we'll put the zipper in a minute, or, you know, 30, 20, 50, something. I'll see how y'all are doing. Any questions? Yes, Phoebe?
This video, will it be like posted for us to see, or is it just live?
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a little while to
Yeah.
process.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
I know. Brave of me to put it. But yeah.
Okay.
And there's other videos, like Tuesdays is up there,
Right. Okay.
and an old one is even within the canvas. So
Okay. Thank you.
I've got lots of video presents. All right, guys. Well, good. We'll start laundering and check out your process. once I fix my ugliness here.
I'm gonna stop live.
Stop, oh yes.
Yeah.